The call came in at 6:47 inches the evening. I remember the exact time because I was still in my scrubs, still smelled like antiseptic, and I had a container of leftover pasta in one hand and my keys in the other. My brother asked me one question. Just one. Why are you standing on the porch with 2 suitcases? I hadn't even told him I was home yet. He lives 4 houses down from us. He'd been walking his dog and just happened to look up. And when I saw him squinting at me from across the street, I realized I had been standing on my own front porch for 23 minutes, in 40-degree weather, unable to get inside my own house, and I hadn't even cried yet. I was too confused to cry. I said, "My mother-in-law changed the locks." He stopped walking. His dog kept going and snapped the leash taut. "She what?" I said it again. Slower this time. As if saying it slower would help either of us make sense of it. My mother-in-law changed the locks on my house to remind me, and I am quoting here, who the real woman of this family is. Let me back up. My husband and I had been married for 3 years when his mother, Diane, decided that our house needed to be reorganized. That was the word she used. Reorganized. Like it was a junk drawer and not the home I had been paying the mortgage on for 2 years before my husband and I even started dating. I want to be very clear about that detail. Because it matters. The house is in my name. The mortgage is in my name. My credit, my down payment, my documentation. I bought it when I was 26, before I knew what the words enmeshed family meant, before I understood that some men come with a mother attached like a second shadow. His name is Marcus. He is kind in the way that people are kind when nothing is being asked of them. He holds doors open. He remembers birthdays. He is the sort of man who seems wonderful at a dinner party and reveals himself slowly, over years, in small moments you keep explaining away. I explained away a lot of things. I am not proud of that. Diane moved in 14 months after we got married. The reason, at the time, was that she had a knee surgery and needed help around the house. Her house. She was supposed to stay with us for 6 weeks. That was 22 months ago. The 6 weeks became 2 months, then 4, then she stopped giving timelines altogether. Her daughter, my sister-in-law Renee, came to visit the following spring and somehow never left either. I came home one Tuesday to find Renee's boxes stacked in the hallway, her shoes lined up by the door like she'd always lived there, and when I asked Marcus what was happening, he said, "She just needs a little time to figure things out." I said, "In our house?" He said, "She's family." Like that was the whole answer. And here is the thing I want you to understand, because I know some of you are already thinking it, why didn't you say something sooner? I did. I said things. I raised concerns. I had conversations that went in circles for hours and ended with me feeling like I was the unreasonable one for wanting boundaries in a house I owned. Diane had a way of reframing everything. If I said I was uncomfortable with her going through my closet, she said I was being paranoid. If I said I didn't like her using my car without asking, she said I was selfish. If I said that I needed some privacy, she said, and this one was my personal favorite, that real family doesn't need privacy from each other. I am a dental hygienist. I work 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, 8 to 5. I leave the house before Marcus does and I get home after him. For 22 months that meant I was leaving Diane and Renee alone in my home every single day. Every day I came home to a different version of my house. Things rearranged. Food I'd bought eaten without being asked. Once, I came home and my bedroom furniture had been moved. Diane said it flowed better the new way. I stood in my own doorway and did not recognize my own room. Marcus's response was to say she was just trying to help. 3 weeks before the lock incident, something shifted. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't one big moment. It was the accumulation of 22 months pressing down on one Tuesday afternoon when I came home and found Diane sitting at my kitchen table, going through a folder of my personal documents. Bank statements, old tax returns. I had kept them in a filing cabinet in the second bedroom that I had specifically asked her not to go into. I stood in the kitchen doorway. I said, "Those are my private documents, Diane." She didn't look up. She said, "I'm just trying to understand the household finances. These are my personal finances. Not household finances." She looked up then. She smiled. It was a particular kind of smile I had seen before, the kind that's meant to make you feel like a child throwing a fit. "Sweetheart," she said, "when you're part of a family, there's no such thing as separate." I closed the folder. I took it out of her hands. She said, "That was rude." I said, "Don't go through my things again." That was a Tuesday. On Wednesday, she was cold to me in the particular way women are cold when they have decided something. On Thursday, Marcus came home from work and told me I owed his mother an apology. I told him I would not be apologizing for asking someone not to read my tax returns. He said I had embarrassed her. I said I was going to call a locksmith if things didn't change. He said I was overreacting. On Friday, I went to work. At 4:15 inches the afternoon, I got a text from Diane. It said, "We had the locks changed today. For security purposes. Marcus has your new key." I read it 3 times. I called Marcus. He didn't answer. I called again. He picked up on the fourth call and told me, with a kind of practiced calm that I now understand took preparation, that his mother had felt unsafe after our argument on Tuesday, and that changing the locks was a reasonable precaution. He said he had my key and would give it to me when he got home. I said, when does she feel unsafe in my house? He said, our house. Marcus. My name is the only name on that mortgage. Silence. Then he said, she's my mother. Like that was still the whole answer. I drove home in a kind of suspended disbelief. I kept thinking that by the time I got there, something would have resolved itself. Marcus would have come to his senses. Diane would have realized how far she'd gone. Something would have shifted back into place. Instead, I pulled up to my house and my key didn't work, and there were 2 suitcases on the porch that I recognized as mine, packed, sitting there like luggage at a hotel checkout. My clothes, my toiletries, my laptop, packed by someone else, without my permission, from my own bedroom, in my own house. I sat in my car for a few minutes. Then I got out, walked to the porch, and stood there. And that is where my brother found me, 23 minutes later, in 40-degree weather, still in my scrubs, still holding a container of leftover pasta. He came across the street and looked at the suitcases and then at me, and his face did something I don't have a word for. Tell me everything, he said. So I did. I told him about the documents. About the furniture. About the 22 months. I told him about the text at 4:15. About Marcus and his practiced calm. About the word our house in a voice that didn't have any apology in it. My brother listened to all of it. He didn't say much. He has that quality, he listens first and talks second, which is rarer than people think. When I was done, he looked at the house and then at me and said one thing. Do you know what your rights are here? I said I wasn't sure. He said, I do. And we're going to use them. His name is Daniel. He is 34. He works in property management and has for 11 years. He knows lease law, tenant rights, and property ownership the way other people know the back of their hands. And what he explained to me in the next 10 minutes, standing on that porch, broke something open in me that I didn't know had been locked shut. He said that in this state, what Diane and Marcus had done wasn't just overstepping. Depending on how it was documented, it could constitute unlawful lockout. The house was in my name. I had never legally added Marcus to the mortgage, though his name was on the deed. He said that Diane and Renee had been staying in my home for almost 2 years with no lease agreement, no formal arrangement, no documentation of any kind. He said that what I had done for 22 months, out of kindness and accommodation, was essentially allow 2 people to become occupants with no legal ground to stand on, which meant I had legal options they had not counted on. He asked if I had proof of anything. Texts. Emails. Anything in writing. I thought about the text Diane had sent me at 4:15. I thought about the texts Marcus had sent me after I confronted him about the documents. I thought about the email thread I had with Marcus 3 months into the living situation where I had put in writing, very clearly, that the arrangement was temporary, and he had agreed. I had that. In writing. With a timestamp. Daniel looked at me and said, don't go anywhere. He called someone. I stood on the porch and listened to him talk for 6 minutes in a low, steady voice. When he hung up, he said his friend, a real estate attorney, could see me first thing Monday morning. Then he picked up one of my suitcases and said, you're staying with me tonight. I stood there. He said, you can go inside and confront them right now, if that's what you need to do. I'll be right next to you. Or you can come to my house, eat dinner, and do this the smart way on Monday. Either way, I'm not leaving you out here. I looked at my front door. I thought about Diane on the other side of it. I thought about Marcus, who had a key to my house that I did not have, because his mother had decided I needed to be reminded of my place. I picked up the other suitcase. And I walked away. I want to tell you about that weekend, because I think people expect that this part of the story is just waiting. It wasn't. It was some of the most clarifying hours of my life. I slept in my brother's guest room, and for the first time in 22 months, no one reorganized anything in the night. No one moved my things. No one left me a note on the counter about how I had loaded the dishwasher wrong. I woke up Saturday morning and the house was exactly as I had left it, and something about that simple fact made me sit on the edge of the bed for a long time. Marcus called 11 times that Friday night. He texted things that started apologetic and shifted, by around midnight, into something that sounded more like accusation. He said I was being dramatic. He said I was embarrassing him by not being home. He said his mother was upset, and it was my fault for escalating things on Tuesday. By 1 a.m., Diane herself texted me, which she had never done directly before. She said that she had only been trying to protect the family. She said that I had a bad attitude. She said that if I came home and apologized to her, she would consider giving me the new key. She said consider. I read that word 4 times. I turned my phone face down and went to sleep. On Monday morning, I sat in a real estate attorney's office and laid out 22 months of documentation that I had not known, until my brother asked that question on the porch, that I had been keeping. The email about the temporary arrangement, the text about my documents, the 4:15 text about the locks, photos I had taken, almost without thinking, of my rearranged furniture twice. I had taken them to send to my sister as a kind of absurd joke, never imagining they would become evidence. The attorney's name was Miss Okafor. She had a very still quality, the kind of stillness that comes from having heard a lot of things and processed them efficiently. She listened, read through what I showed her, and then looked at me over her glasses. She said, "You own this property outright in terms of the mortgage?" I said yes, she said, "and these two individuals, your mother-in-law and sister-in-law, have been residing there for approximately 22 months with no formal lease, no rental agreement, and no documented financial contribution to the household?" I said yes. She nodded slowly. Then she explained that what I had was, legally speaking, a fairly clear case. The lockout was actionable. Diane and Renee's status as occupants gave them certain rights, which meant I couldn't simply remove them overnight, but those rights came with a process, and we could begin that process immediately. She also explained that Marcus's involvement in the lockout, specifically his admission via text that he had authorized it and was withholding my key, was significant. She asked if I wanted to pursue the lockout claim or focus on the occupancy removal first. I said, both. She said, good. That afternoon, a formal notice was sent to the property. Not a heated text. Not a midnight conversation going in circles. A legal notice, on official letterhead, citing specific statutes, requiring specific actions within a specific time frame. Marcus called me when he received it. He didn't sound calm anymore. He said, "What is this?" I said, "It's a legal notice." He said, "You're suing my mother?" "I'm exercising my rights as the property owner. I was locked out of my own home, Marcus. You're overreacting. You're blowing this up. Do you know how this looks? How does it look? Like you don't care about this family." I had heard that sentence, or versions of it, so many times. I had let it stop me so many times. I sat with it for a moment, the way you sit with something you finally decided to put down. I said, "I'm going to need you to focus on the notice, not on how it looks." He was quiet. Then he said, "My mother is devastated." I said, "She changed the locks on my house and packed my bags. I need you to sit with that for a minute." He didn't say anything. "When you're ready to have a real conversation," I said, "you know where to reach me." I hung up. What happened in the following 2 weeks moved faster than I expected and slower than I wanted, which is how legal things tend to go. Diane and Renee were given proper notice and a timeline. They contested it, initially, through Marcus, who tried to argue that the house was a marital home and that he had rights to make decisions about it. Miss Okafor addressed that with a patience that I found genuinely impressive. Meanwhile, Daniel had done something I didn't know about until he told me, quietly, over dinner one night. In the weeks before all of this, when I had mentioned to him almost as a joke, as the kind of venting you do to family, that Diane had been going through my mail and my documents, he had told me to start photographing things. Not because he knew it would come to this. Just because he said you should always document when something feels wrong. He had sent me, via email, a note that just said, "Keep records." With a date stamp. I had done it without fully understanding why. That email chain, those photos, that paper trail, all of it painted a picture that was very hard to argue against. Not just the lockout in isolation, but a pattern. A documented, time-stamped pattern of someone slowly trying to take over a space that wasn't hers, with the cooperation of a man who had decided his mother's comfort was worth more than his wife's dignity. Diane and Renee were out of the house within 30 days. They left without speaking to me directly. Renee shot me a look on her way out that I'm sure she intended to be withering. Diane said something to Marcus in the driveway, too low for me to hear, and Marcus stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the ground. I watched from the window. I was not glad, exactly. I was something more like relieved, in the hollow way you feel when a sound that's been constant finally stops and you realize how much energy you'd been spending just adjusting to it. Marcus and I talked. We talked for a long time, over several nights, in the kitchen, sometimes without finishing a sentence. He said he understood he had failed me. He said he hadn't realized how far it had gone. He said his mother had always had this pull over him and he had never learned to push back. He was not wrong about any of that. None of it was a lie. But understanding a thing and having corrected it are different things. And some damage has a shape that doesn't fully repair. I filed for separation 2 months later. It was not a decision I made angry. It was a decision I made in the quiet of a house that was finally, actually mine, sitting in a room where nothing had been moved, where no one had gone through anything, where the only person who had decided where things went was me. Marcus did not fight it. I think, somewhere in him, he knew it was coming long before I said it. Here's what I want you to take from this, if you've been listening all the way through. Not the legal process, though I will say please document everything, always, even when you're rolling your eyes at yourself for doing it. Not the specific tactics, though find yourself a Daniel, find yourself someone who hears the wrong in a situation before you can even name it. What I want you to take is this. The moment that changed everything was not the lockout. The lockout was just when I finally stopped explaining things away. The real moment was when my brother asked me if I knew what my rights were. Because what he was really asking was, do you know that you have rights? Do you know that the things being done to you are not just rude, not just uncomfortable, but actually, concretely, specifically wrong in ways that can be addressed? I didn't know. I had spent 22 months being made to feel like my discomfort was the problem. Like my boundaries were the problem. Like the very fact that I had opinions about my own home was the problem. It wasn't. The problem was never me. I live in that house now. Just me. I bought a new plant for the kitchen windowsill last week and put it exactly where I wanted it, and no one has moved it since. That shouldn't feel like freedom. But it does. It really does. If you're watching this and you're somewhere in the middle of what I described, the slow accumulation, the small surrenders, the way you keep adjusting to things that should never have required adjustment, I want you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to know your rights. You are allowed to use them. You do not need to wait until someone packs your bags and puts them on the porch. You don't have to wait for a lockout to decide you deserve a home that's actually yours.